Okay, hi guys. So this is the romanticism lecture. As you're looking at this painting, it sort of exemplifies a lot of what romanticism had at its core, which was idealism and hope and the individual at the center of a future of possibilities. So when we hear romanticism, we often think something about love, which did exist, but it was very, very different from that. And I know that you guys have learned quite a bit about romanticism last year with Miss Pucci, if you had her. And we're just going to kind of look at it, relook at it, I guess, in new ways. So I just included this really fantastic image down here. And this quotation, romanticism is precisely situated neither in choice of subject nor in exact truth, but in a way of feeling. And I love that last line, so that's why I included it, in a way of feeling. When you look at this image, it's not just a stagnant image of nature. It has a feeling to it. And just as poetry in all of the books, there was intense emotion um, involved with that and a focus on the way that people's emotions perceive things. So I just wanted to give you a couple of historical considerations, and it began in 1798 with the publication of the lyrical ballads by both Wordsworth and Coleridge, and ended circa 1832 with the deaths of Sir Walter Scott and Goethe. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is kind of contained to the English and German side of Romanticism. The American side of things continued on beyond that, as you learned uh, last year, I'm sure. So this is kind of just in the context of the English and German original idea of Romanticism. I have included two different pieces here. The left is lines written in early spring, and that is in lyrical ballads, and you can read that and pause this if you'd like. And on the right is just an excerpt from Sir Walter Scott. And so I kind of wanted to give you a range of what these kinds of ideas looked like from beginning to end. And if you can hear my cat breathing heavy, I'm sorry. This is now the fourth time I've tried to record this, so please bear with me. If this doesn't work, then I'm going to be very sad about it. All right. So I wanted to also bring into this that this was the age of revolutions, and I know you guys have studied this over and over and over. We have the American Revolution, we have the French Revolution. The very spirit of Romanticism was at the heart of these revolutions and of this hope and anger and just intense emotion that changed a lot of things. It was political, economic, and social traditions that were being reconsidered and rehashed and challenged, and it was really awesome. I would have loved to man at that time. The revolutionary energy was at the core of Romanticism as a movement, not only in terms of themes, but also in terms of the way they approached poetry and literature differently than previous generations. They consciously set out to transform not only the theory and practice of poetry and all art, but really it was more than just art. It was a way of perceiving the world, a way of living, a way of being, which you'll understand a little bit more as we continue. The photo that I included here is Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People. For those of you that went to the Louvre this year, you probably saw it. It was very, very large on the wall there. So the first kind of major tenet for Romanticism is imagination. And I've included a little quote by Blake: "What is now proved was once only imagined." And I find that incredibly wonderful. So I just want to kind of recap some of the things. They had imagination as the supreme faculty of the mind, the most important part of the way we perceive things, which contrasted from the traditional argument of the supremacy of reason from the Age of Reason that preceded Romanticism. So, from a very stark and objective world, they were entrenched in that. They were sort of railing against that, as we've learned about most movements. They could looked at it as our ultimate shaping and creative power. That imagination was at the heart of everything. That put us sort of that's how we were connected to nature and God. It was dynamic and active. It wasn't passive. and it was just a really important part of shaping our world and our understanding of the world. It also helped humans in our reality. It was not just a way that we perceive it, but how we create it. And I can go into some different philosophies from which it sprung. If you'd like to talk to me about that, I'd be more than happy to. But we're going to continue to focus. So it unites both reason and feeling, and that sort of synthesizing, through that synthesizing, they were able to recognize and reconcile differences and opposites in the world. That I love paradoxes and juxtaposition, and this was a way that they were able to, to deal with that. It was bound to nature and the individual, and it enables us to see a system, the world as a system of symbols. So the sort of archetypal things that had happened early on in neoclassicism were reconceptualized in this time in a different way, and we'll talk about that in a second too. So nature was the second tenet. So we have imagination and nature. Now, I had mentioned earlier that imagination, our faculty of imagination, actually put us in the powerful realm of nature, but nature was also something that was at the heart of Romanticism beyond that. They looked at nature as a work of art. It was constructed by us and our imagination, and it created a language for us to understand the world. It was healing. It was the subject and the image of what they wrote about, how they perceived the world. They were able to use it to kind of escape, in the world of the Industrial Revolution and all of these changes, and they could feel the change in not only the industry, but also in classes, and things began to feel very artificial to them, and this was their way to get away from that feeling. The nature also had the status of this sort of like organically unified whole. It was not the scientific rationalistic view and mechanical laws that had come beforehand. And instead of looking at as a universe, as a machine, it was like a tree or mankind itself, and it was very metaphorical and deep. It also captures like the sensual part of the world, and so maybe that's where people get the idea of romantic. But it was just about living and feeling and being a vibrant part of your experience. And also, it was essentially a poetry of meditation. And as you can see, I've included yet another romantic image. This is an actual romantic painting of nature and sort of possibility. And then over here is a meditation you've probably heard about by William Wordsworth, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. It has to do with daffodils dancing, and it's a lovely poem, so take some time to check that out as well. The third component or essential component is individualism. The romantic hero is at the heart of that. So basically, we'd seen heroes before in the neoclassic idea, where this person would go on these quests and all of these things. But now this takes a new look at it as an individual, as a hero, and as the hero as artist, that we create our own world. So it's not predetermined for us to go on some sort of quest. We take our own. So they were able to sort of create their own kind of literary types, hero, artist, heaven storming types, the Captain Ahabs that were trying to find their Moby Dick. We have The Outcast from Cain to the Ancient Mariner, which is Coleridge's big, awesome poem, if you want to read that. And you guys know about Hester Prynne. She was her new kind of character. None of these characters had been seen before. And Faust, who you can ask Lucy about. I want to just read this little passage here. Faust wins salvation in Gothe's great drama for the very reasons his characteristic striving for the unattainable beyond the morally permitted and his insatiable thirst for activity that earlier had been viewed as a component of his tragic sin. It was in fact Shelley's opinion that Satan in his noble defiance was the real hero in Paradise Lost. So you have these sort of like devil-like figures that are humanized, and almost they try to create sympathy because they didn't see things in absolutes or in black and white. And over here, if you would like, oops, not Blake, my B. This is a John Keats poem that I found. I was going to use a Blake poem. So the individualism in poetic style, they were bold. They didn't like the previous time's restraint. They didn't like the idea of clarity and absolutes. They liked suggestiveness. They liked freedom, the freedom of experimentation, and they looked to themselves as the makers, the creators, the gods, the natural pieces of art. They also, like I said, rejected absolute systems, and this included both philosophy and religion. They did not deny the existence of God, they just started to, they were just a different mode. So before, whereas God had sort of disappeared in the age of reason for many people, they didn't reject God or the idea of God. They just challenged maybe how people saw it. They were in favor of the idea that every person must create their own system by which to live, which is kind of a lovely idea to think about how we all are individually living in this big collective, like we've been talking about this year. And also, they advanced the use of local color, specifically in their style, which I know you focused on last year. There's just a little quote by William Wordsworth at the bottom if you want to check it out. So the last thing that I want to include, or if you want to listen, this is Isaiah Berlin's lecture on romanticism, and I'll just play a little bit for you.
During this last lecture of the series, I propose to say, however rash it may seem, what it is that the heart of romanticism appears to me to be. I should like to go back again to a theme which I spoke of in the first and second lectures on this topic, namely the old tradition which is at the heart of all Western thought for at least 2,000 years and more before the middle of the 18th century. That particular attitude, those particular beliefs, which it appears to me romanticism attacked and gravely damaged, namely the old proposition that virtue is knowledge, a proposition which was enunciated, I suppose, for the first time explicitly by Socrates in the pages of Plato, and which is common to him and to the Christian tradition.